saying, if Nigeria cannot protect Christians, we are going to move in viciously, and we are going to do so to protect Christians. And I think Trump is being advised that the Nigerian government is working softly on this issue because President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a Muslim, because Vice President Shetima is also a Muslim, and that if it were different, they would behave differently. But from where I sit, that is not necessarily the case. The situation in Nigeria must be understood from a historical context. And that history gives you a Nigeria which, when the North and the South came together, there was what could be described as the Muslim North, and for want of a better term, the Christian South, or largely Christian South. But remember, there are also other African religions, but that is the preferred definition. With the consequence that Nigeria has always had tension of one kind or another, the tension that led to the civil war in Biafra, which was not founded on Christianity at all, and of course the many coups d'etats that saw at that time in the 1960 of the killing of people like Ahmadu Bello from the north, and the imposition of the military administration. But to come to more recent history is that there are elements within Nigeria in the north, and this came to the fore in the year 2009 with the formation of what is now popularly known as Boko Haram by Yusuf Mahmoud. When Yusuf Mahmoud formed Boko Haram at that time, there were a number of things that were defining the philosophy. And remember that the version of Islam that he propagated is Salafism. And Salafism is a sect of Sunni Muslim. And their argument was that they want to restore Nigeria to the original Islam as was practiced by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. When that happened in 2009, of course, Muhammad Yusuf was arrested. And when he was arrested and he died in jail, he became a martyr. And that changed the complexion of Boko Haram, which means Western education is bad, if you are to render it in simplistic terms. And the whole idea, and this is what they were selling at that time, what is the value of this education where you get education, but there are no jobs, there are no opportunities, and that appealed to very many young people in northern Nigeria. And that is why it is characterized as Muslims rising against Christians. When Mahmoud Yusuf died in prison and Abu Bakr Shekau then became the leader of Boko Haram, there were then quite a number of splits within the Boko Haram that we knew, with allegiance being declared to Al-Qaeda in Iraq and in Syria. Meanwhile, activities then heightened and they started killing persons because of their religious affiliation. But it must also be remembered that even Muslims were killed in the process. But the declaration was that we want to Islamize not only the northern part of Nigeria, but the entire Nigeria and introduce Sharia law. But these activities were not confined to Nigeria. It was along the Chad basin, so that Chad was affected, Niger was affected, and even Cameroon was affected. But of course, the theater of action is Nigeria. The consequence of that now has been that they have engaged in activities which have led to the death of many. You remember the bombing of the UN offices in Abuja, which led to the death of 23 people. You remember the Chibok girls, when they raided schools and picked the Chibok girls, some of whom are still in custody. And when, of course, Shekau himself died or is said to have committed suicide because there were splits within Boko Haram, we now have a situation where we have an organization which has different factions. And these factions are operating sometimes at cross purposes. And Boko Haram has been declared as a terrorist organization. And the effect of Boko Haram has been therefore to antagonize Christians. And we know that Christian clergy have been targeted. We know that churches have been targeted. And you've now created an environment that depicts these particular activities as targeting Christians. And indeed, there are Christians who have now come out and say that we are going to organize ourselves in order to resist this. But that must be contradistinguished with certain sober voices within Islam in Nigeria who say that this is a terrorist organization, should be seen as such, and we should therefore not condemn the entire Islam. But as the saying goes, bad news spreads faster than good news.